In this PowerPoint, we will be covering nonverbal communication as cues, as intentional communication, misinterpretation of nonverbal communication, and codes. And we'll be looking at definitions of the codes such as proxemics, kinesics, paralanguage, and so on. So let's think about this. How much do we communicate nonverbally? Well, studies show that it could be between 60% and up to 90% that we communicate nonverbally. It depends on the context as to how much is understood nonverbally. But the one thing we do know is that it is over 50%. As professionals, we analyze body language and meaning and specifics in our culture. For instance, functions of gestures, are called emblems, which is an understood meaning in our culture. So the functions of a gesture is an understood meaning in our culture, and I'm sure you understand this meaning as an emblem. Here's some particular gestures and meaning. For the most part, again, it's not black and white. Usually we read nonverbals in clusters. If someone's not providing you eye contact, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are not credible. They could be shy, but we look at nonverbals as clusters, so you could look through these particular areas of gestures and meaning. Nonverbals as cues. Across cultures, people generally recognize that nonverbal cues of pleasure or displeasure, liking or disliking, tension or relaxation, a high status or low status. Most people worldwide identify the facial expressions of surprise. We learn a lot through the eyes when someone's surprised or angry. And as we see here, anger, disgust, fear, sadness, and contempt are more difficult to discern in recent Japanese American studies. So we know that nonverbal behaviors are cues to us. The definition, nonverbal communication as intentional. Okay, so when we intend to offer nonverbal, it is as if we are using a spoken word. So intentional use, as in using a non-spoken symbol to communicate a specific message. Okay, so let's look at how we use nonverbals. We know that we use, for instance, if you can't hear somebody, you give that intentional nonverbal cue of tugging at your ear. But some of the functions, we replace spoken messages, such as a noisy situation, or there's no language commonality. We use hand gestures to help us communicate if we're at a loud concert, let's say. Sending uncomfortable messages. I need to go. For instance, you're speaking to someone and you see that they start to turn around. They're not providing eye contact. They're looking away from you, beyond you. You know that perhaps if you are very other-oriented, that they need to go. You form impressions, functions of nonverbal, forming impressions that guide communication. What do you wear to a job interview as contrast to what do you wear to a concert? Okay, you form an impression based on what you wear, or your nonverbal clothes is a good indicator of this. You make relationships clear. Seating and power, okay, if you sit at the head of the table, that means you are the person in charge, the chair or the head of the household. Usually they say that if people sit in the corner of the table, and again, you're not providing eye contact, or you're kind of slunched over, you're not engaging in the particular situation. Regulating interaction. We know when to take our turn in a conversation. We know when a person, provides good eye contact or he or she's quiet, that they're looking for a response back. And reinforcing and modifying verbal messages. We look at meta messages. If you haven't studied what a meta message is, it's a message within a message. So usually if we have a message within a message, we read that internal nonverbal communication rather than the message itself. So if someone came up to you and you asked them, how does my new haircut look? And they say, it looks good. Okay, and they kind of give a smirky face. They said it looks good, right? But it's how they said it. And you read and you look at the nonverbals, it looks good. You read that more than the spoken word. So that's the meta message that we read, and we tend to read more so than the message itself. Okay, knowing culture through nonverbal messages, many nonverbal messages used in a culture are related to and consistent with other aspects of culture. For instance, in Europe, body language is an important indicator of a person's status, of his or her education, good manners, how they carry themselves, the use of their body language. In a sense, in Europe, is an indicator that, oh, this person is well educated. Culture is interrelated, and nonverbal messages are one part of that interrelated system. Okay, nonverbal misinterpretations as barriers. We see that nonverbal expressions vary from culture to culture. It's just those variations that make nonverbal interpretation a barrier. So again, a thumbs up could mean something totally different in a different culture. Sometimes it depends on the context as well. Watch this YouTube video at your leisure. Oops, it just popped up. And I don't want to take the time to watch it, but I want you to watch it at your leisure. And okay, we're back. Okay, again, watch the YouTube video at your leisure. Let's look at non-verbal message codes, proxemics, and also too, I have another link to a video within this PowerPoint that you can view. Proxemics is the study of personal space. We're all familiar perhaps with the program Seinfeld that was entitled The Close Talker, when someone's speaking to you very closely to your face. And we know this is our personal space. As you see here on the PowerPoint, our intimate space is 2 fists away, usually intended for people that we are very close to. Personal space is your handshake, 1 handshake away, usually during family gatherings or good friends. Social, 2 arm lengths away, the distance you stand with people that you don't really know too well, kind of in social networking. And public space is kind of like a student and a teacher situation, a public speaker. You feel comfortable, this is the space where you feel comfortable addressing a large group. Nonverbal message codes again. Kinesics. The study of kinesics is the use of gestures, body movements, facial expression, eye contact. Okay, and you could watch the YouTube video on kinesics as well. Chronemics, our use of time. Very important because in different cultures we use our time differently. Monochronic time and polychronic time. Monochronic time is doing one thing at a time, very characteristic of the United States and Northern Europe. We order and plan our time, and this is rooted in the Industrial Revolution that took place in the US when we had many factory workers. Life required people to be on time in the factory to begin their shift, to end their shift, and someone to take it over. Polychronic time is doing many things at once. Characteristic of Latin American countries and the Middle East. It stresses the involvement of people, many people, and completing the transactions. In polychronic cultures, nothing is firm. Plans can be changed up to the very last minute. Here is a chart that shows the predictable patterns between cultures with differing time systems. And you can look at this at your leisure. For instance, monochronic people do one thing at a time. Polychronic people do many things at a time. Monochronic concentrate on the job. Polychronic, highly distractible and subject to interruptions. Monochronic are low context and need information, not direct communication. Remember we talked about low context communication cultures. High context, there's information that's kind of embedded that's not said. It's a ritual that is known in the context. And they already have the information. Paralanguage, vocal characterizations. Sobs and laughs and qualifiers, your pitch, your intensity, your tone, your vocal segregators, and again you could watch the YouTube video and that'll give you more information on paralanguage. Nonverbal message codes. Silence can communicate a number of meanings. For folks in the United States, when one is fearful in communicating or stage fright, it's considered to be, that's what silence communicates. However, in traditional Eastern societies, there's more value on silence than in Western cultures, Western societies. Haptics, the use of touch, high fives, bumps, how we communicate through touch, how we give hugs, how different cultures use touch to communicate, that handshake, the firm handshake, haptics of what that communicates. Clothing and physical appearance. Clothing can reflect cultural heritage, as we know, and subgroup or subculture or co-culture membership. Think about what a group of Harley riders wear. They wear the leathers. Or back in the 60s and 70s, there were many people who traveled with the Grateful Dead, and they wore the traditional, as what many call the hippie clothes with the tie-dye and the long skirts. So again, this is a code, a non-verbal code. Territoriality is how space can be used to communicate messages. What we're familiar with in Asian cultures is feng shui, and that's the use of using furniture or objects or buildings to produce a positive energy to achieve happiness, prosperity. Olfactics is the study of communication through smell. Do you use one of those little Christmas trees in your car so your car smells good? Do you burn that vanilla candle? Do we wear colognes to smell good, to portray that we are clean and that we want to be around people? And you can watch the YouTube video at your leisure as well to learn more about that. Thank you.